I'm going to preface first by just saying that we are doing these in person as well as on Zoom. So our next few ones will also be dual like this. So feel free to come out in person if you have the time. We provide breakfast. Seems like everyone's enjoying the breakfast. But today we're going to go ahead and get started. Let me know if at any point you can't hear me because I am talking this way. Our topic today is appropriations and event protocol. So we're going to kind of go over what your students can expect from the appropriations process, and then also like university forms and policies that you need to be aware of for events, because I do know that funding is most typically gained for events. All right, let me see if I can minimize this so that this is easier to see here. All right, so we're going to go over what is appropriations, the deadlines, the policies, how to submit the actual request, event protocols, and then just some tips and tricks. So what is appropriations and how is it used? So the undergraduate student government is where appropriations funding comes from. This money comes from the student fee. So I believe it's like 25 bucks that the students pay along with their tuition every semester. And a portion of that money gets sent to USG to allocate to student clubs. So here at Tempe, this is different for every campus. So if you're on a different campus, feel free to ask any questions that you have, and I can connect you with the appropriations team on your respective campus. But generally, a lot of things are the same. So there is general operations funding, events funding, startup club funding for new clubs, and professional development funds. If you are an advisor or associated with a graduate student organization, they will get their funding from a different place, GPSA, which is the Graduate Professional Student Association, rather than the undergraduate student government. And like I said, I'll share this out. The link for that funding is in there. It's a completely different process. So there's going to be a different set of rules and different people to talk to. So let's talk a little bit more about these types of funding. Operations is capped at $600 per club per semester. So operations actually closes this Friday, but it will reopen in spring. So you get another chance to get another $600. This is for things that are for general club operations over time, like marketing or tablecloth or table runners, things like that. And then we have event funding. There's no specific cap on event funds. You can request multiple times if you would like. It's more up to the appropriation students to deem like, is this a good use of student funds? But this can be used for things like event materials, so like food or activities. Like if you're doing like a painting event, you can buy your paintbrushes and your paint with this process. Startup funding is more specific. This can only be used by clubs created in the semester that the operations fund has closed. So this probably doesn't apply to any of you, since I assume if you're here, you probably already advise an organization. But if your club was created on October 1st, because operations closes this Friday, September 30th, you can apply for startup funding. Same thing as operations, it's just for those new clubs. And then professional development funds are a little bit different. These funds must be requested by individuals rather than a club, but you can still use them in a club-oriented fashion. So say your group wants to like go on a conference, you would just have to have each individual member request from the portal instead of like one head officer doing it for everybody. So let's talk a little bit about deadlines. These are the deadlines for fall. If you want, you can take a photo, but I said we'll send this all out to you, so you'll be good. You'll have it. Ops closes this Friday, September 30th. Everything else, the two main ones, startup and event, close on November 4th, and then the travel funds close on October 21st. So there is also, it changes year by year. The appropriations committee gets to make this choice since they are the students and it is the student money. They sometimes, if you have a request in and there's something wrong with it, like it gets set back for follow-up, sometimes they'll give you like another day after the deadline to fix the error, but they will not accept new requests. So there'll be communication sent out about that. So hopefully this training helps to give some good information.
Graduates as well, or just on
The graduate process is different. So yeah, are you with a graduate organization? I'll make sure to get you connected with those resources.
Professional development. I saw that you're taking professional exams. Would that be like the
Yes, correct.
Okay, so can you tell me more about that?
For sure, yeah. So students can get with the professional development funds, not only travel and conference money, but money to take their professional exams like the MCAT, the LSAT, the GRE. What will happen is the students will apply, they get approved, they can go, then they have to front the money. So they'll take the test, and then ASU will reimburse a portion of the exam. So it's different case by case basis. The students will help guide them through the process if they apply, but it is a super great resource, especially for the MCAT.
And it's both the officers and the members.
Yeah, this is for anyone. You don't even have to be in a club. You can just apply. Yeah.
Quick question, Ron, like those questions are asked, whether you're repeating.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So here are all of
Let's just
our.
get a check.
Oh yeah, for sure. This is probably, yeah, same thing. Okay, cool. These are the spring deadlines. Very similar timelines, amounts of weeks, things like that. Yes. Yes, they do not have to be part of a club. Yep, super great resource for anyone taking those professional exams. Undergraduate students. Graduate programs has their own portal for things like this as well.
How does that differ from career services, what they do for professional exams? Or-
Yeah. So our question being asked is, how does career services differ from this? So career services will give resources on like study methods, recommendations where to take your test, recommendations on where to apply, things like that. They do not give funding as far as I'm aware. So this is just straight funding. It's no other information, just funding. Yeah. So let's cover then some requirements to receive appropriations funds. So this is what we look for when we receive a request. So we look for to make sure that everyone is an undergraduate student. And again, this is just for USG Appropriations. We check that they're a top officer for the registered organization. This does not apply to the professional development funds. This are those other three. And they have to have completed the required appropriations training and scored 100% on the 2 quizzes. Super easy. One is 16 questions, one is 8 questions. I will share that link out. All of your students should already have the link if they haven't done it yet. And then the actual request. So we need to see a public purpose statement containing how the items purchased are going to benefit the club and the university. And there are guidelines on how to do a public purpose on the USG website, which I will also share at the end. But it's essentially just explaining like, well, like why should we fund your request? We also need quotes with prices and the vendor displayed. We get a lot where people attach the quote, but they like crop it and then we can't see where they're purchasing from. So we just want to make sure that it is evident where you are getting the items from, because there are some restrictions on vendors depending on what you're purchasing. So with that, the restrictions come in with branded items and apparel. So if you're buying shirts, it has to be from an ASU approved vendor, and we have to see the imprint that you're wanting to put on the shirt so that we can assure it matches ASU licensing standards. And usually that's super easy. Usually the company will provide you with that proof anyways, or you can just send like the PNG, PDF of whatever you've created. And I also will note at this point in the process as well that the students must do all of this. So hopefully this gives you a good background to be able to assist them. But if an advisor submits, it will be denied. So for items being requested, these are the baseline rules. Everything has to be things that USG can purchase as per their bylaws. All of that information is on their website. There are some prohibited items, like, for example, we can't purchase live plants. That is just a recommendation from the university that they have to follow. Nothing can allude to alcohol or alcohol consumption in any way, and it has to have not already been purchased. So there are payment methods. So say like you want to get, we'll use paintbrushes again. USG approves you. Okay, cool. Now you can purchase them and USG can reimburse you if you don't want to go through the process of like getting a purchasing card or an invoice or any of that. But if you've already purchased it before USG has approved your budget, they will not approve the request and you will not be able to get your money back. So keep that in mind. Everything needs to be appropriate and in line with those ASU licensing guides. And then here's the big piece. Things, especially for events, need to be requested 28 days in advance, 4 weeks. If it is under 5,000, 35 days in advance if it's between $5,000 and $10,000. And anything bigger than $10,000 needs to be requested at least 42 days in advance. This is because once you get past this 5K threshold, the students will have to either present to the USG Appropriations Committee in person or over Zoom, or to the USG Senate as a whole. So appropriations comes in if you're over 5K, and then when you're over 10K, the students would have to go to the entire Senate and get an approval from the whole Senate, which is a body of about, I want to say like 35 students. So keep that in mind. If you're trying to do something quickly and you're like, well, my request could be 4,000 or it could be 6,000, maybe do that 4,000 to help speed up the process. I'm gonna check our chat really quick here. Perfect. So here's some more specific funding policies, and I will acknowledge this is a ton of information. It doesn't change too much per semester. So if you have student leaders that are staying in the same role for a while, hopefully they're getting more familiar with the information, and we provide all this information to them as well. But for operations funding, these are things that can be used over time. Like I said, like a table drape, marketing, things like that. If you submit for food or snacks, which a lot of people do for their meetings to operations, that will be denied as well, because the current university event protocols state that if you have food at an event, we need to have it logged on Sun Devil Sync. And in order to do that, it has to go through the event process. Items for events will also be denied. So obviously if you're getting something for overtime, like paintbrushes again, you're like, oh no, but like our club just does this all the time. We're a painting club. Okay, yeah, sure. We get that, that's off. But if it's very evident that you're like, this is for one specific thing, it will be denied and be asked to be submitted under the events portal.
We had a question in the chat asking, what if two organizations are sponsoring the event and would one of them apply, would both apply? What is the process they should follow?
Sure, great question. So if we have more than one organization hosting an event, it is kind of up to them. If you want to have just one org apply for the funding and you're doing an event and you're not worried about the cap, go for it. Otherwise, both groups can apply. You might be able to get a little bit more money that way since it's two separate clubs, but do keep in mind like the processing times on everything. So if one club submits week 1 and the other club submits week 3, it is less likely that the club in week 3 will get approved. So just keep that in mind. Hopefully that answered your question. Going back to ops funding, like I said before, there's a $600 cap. Oh, you can come to there's food, take food. You can also submit multiple small requests, but I wouldn't recommend that. So the $600 cap, say you submit twice for $300, chances are both of those things will get approved as long as you're meeting our other guidelines, because it is still under 600. But of course, that's just going to take longer because now they have to review 2 requests. So if you can, just try to submit it all at once. For events, this is the big thing. The funding, the event that you're asking for the funding for must be listed on Sun Devil Sync. So say you're having a pizza party. We need to be able to log into your Sun Devil Sync page and see that you have a pizza party coming up. And the details need to match the details listed in the request. Because the request will ask for like date of the event, time of the event, things like that. We want to make sure it matches the event on Sun Devil Sync so that we're not funding something that like accidentally has been moved or doesn't happen. And the event also must be open to all students. So if you're having a private meeting and you're like, no, only club members are allowed, USG will not fund that. For startup funding, like I said, the club has to be created for this semester on or after October 1st. That will be different for spring, obviously. And then for professional development funding, most, if not all, campuses have a professional development funding branch. So for here, Tempe, the student needs to be an ASU Tempe student. That would apply if your student's a Poly student, like they need the request from Poly. And then this request is on the basis of individuals rather than club. All right, so I'm gonna kind of run through a little bit of the process on how to create a budget request and get the funding. So these are just the steps from start to finish. You're gonna have to have someone take the training for your organization. And once you know what you want to buy, best practice to gather all your quotes, invoices, things like that as soon as possible. Know what you want to buy. And then you can create your budget request. So you're going to go to the manage page of your organization. You're going to click on the finance tab, and then you're going to click new request. you'll be able to see all the different portals. They'll come up for every campus. So if you do have a club that functions 50-50 on 2 different campus locations, you have an opportunity to apply to the funding for another campus and list that like, hey, this event's 50-50. We're going to have 10 poly students and 10 Tempe students. So we're asking for money from both places. So the first page of the request is pretty simple. Basic info like club name, your email, and then your public purpose statement, which we talked about earlier. And then on the next page, you're going to fill out your actual budget. So how this works is you're going to be asked to fill in line items. So let's say you're buying from Amazon, Walmart, and Target. We're going to want to see 3 line items. You'll just click the little plus button and keep adding them with the name of the vendor and then a screenshot of your quote, how much you're expecting to pay and what you're buying. And if you are purchasing things that are branded, you will add a $0 line item and attach the photo of the imprint. So it'll show up as a line item, but it won't obviously be another item or cost any money. And after that, you just submit and you wait. Your request will either be sent back to you with edits. They're never straight denied. Same thing as club registrations. You always have the chance to fix them. Or it will be sent forward for review by the appropriations team. So what happens is myself and my team will review the request on a preliminary basis to make sure it's in line with all policies. And then we forward it to the students. And the students then decide if it's a good use of the student team money or not. And if approved, you will receive the notice, and then you will have to work with the USG business office to make the purchase. So USG is actually just located like right below us on the 2nd floor, and their USG appropriations chairs have their office hours on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I'll share all that information out with all of you here on the Zoom and in person. So if your students ever have more specific questions, they can go in there and ask, or if they want to be like kind of walk through the process, like they're just confused, they can go there and ask as well. And they should be able to help you out. So these will be our resources. We have this USG Tempe website. This contains approved vendors, deadlines, all the contacts, speaker agreement forms if you're bringing a guest to campus, and the list of prohibited spending items. We also have the GPSA website, which has some of the GPSA policies, and then the link to the appropriations training. Awesome. And Lori, I will go ahead and answer your message privately here in a minute. Or Chris, I guess I can show it to Chris. So we're going to move on to events after this. So are there any questions about appropriation? Yes. Let me come over here so our friends can hear us, but I will respond to you. All right, so our question is about ASU branding and what is appropriate for students to use in the items they are purchasing for their clubs. And the answer to that is it's the same policies as used on the registration. So they are welcome to use any colors from the ASU color palette. They can use the Sparky logo as long as it has the trademark image. They can use the pitchfork as long as it has the trademark image, but only the academic pitchfork. They can't use the athletic pitchfork, which is the one that kind of looks like it's on fire. They can use the little basic like forks up sign, things like that. They cannot use the ASU sunburst. They cannot use the little @ symbol. They have to use the word AT. And all of those rules are outlined in their Canvas training. That should be in both of them, actually, the advisor and the student. If it's not, we will get that fixed. And it also is in our student organization handbook, which should be linked in your training as well. I can link it in this so that when I send this out, you'll have access to it. But it lists like yes and no, very basic, like what can you use, what can't you use? And you can always shoot them to us if you're like, hey, does this meet guidelines? And we can be like, oh, yes, no. And also usually your vendor will check it too. So if you're ever concerned, usually your vendor, since you have to use an approved vendor, will send it to ASU licensing and they will check it as well so that there's no issues made. Does that answer your question? Cool.
We actually did use the sunburst thing, but we had written permission from someone at ASU, I think it was the legal department, to do that. So there was a way that we were able to do that. It was a one-time event.
So we're talking about, can you get one-time exceptions for any of the, I guess, prohibited items? And I cannot ever guarantee that they're going to do that again, but you are welcome if you have a contact with licensing to ask about it. We will obviously like initially deny anything that doesn't meet our standards, but if you feel like you need to pursue an approval because the logo just, I don't know, something matches better, or it feels like you fit the spirit of your event better, we cannot stop you from doing so. I just cannot guarantee that they will say yes. Awesome. Any other appropriations related questions before we get on to events? We'll check our chat here. All right. In that case, we'll move on to a couple event things. Not too much here. Luckily, events are a little bit more simple than funding, which I know is kind of a double-edged sword, right? Because usually you get funding for your events. But we're going to talk about just 3 quick policies to be aware of. Reservations. You do need reservations for anything happening in said reservable space. And you get access to that by being a registered student club. So like, for example, if you want to go in the Memorial Union, the Student Pavilion, can't think of anywhere else, spaces in the library, things like that, you need reservations. And there are a couple of different contacts based on the space you want to reserve. And I have that all in here, so we'll go over that in a minute. Sun Devil Sync. So currently, the university requires that all events are submitted to Sun Devil Sync. So that same process we talked about earlier for event funding, it's got to be uploaded to your organization's page. Super quick process. It's just a couple pages. You enter basic info. You have a lot of fun options. You can make an RSVP, limit RSVPs, change who can see your event, things like that. It's a pretty intuitive process. Definitely feel free to take some time looking at it and playing around with all the little tools. You can add an event image, and you can actually do even like post-event survey. So anyone who checks in 24 hours after the event will be sent an email with the questions that you customize to give you some feedback about your event, which is really cool. This also allows you to take attendance using the Sun Devil Sync event pass. We're going to go over that as well. And it also just gives you kind of like a baseline of how your organization has been doing. So you have all of your attendance records in one place, all of your event records in one place, and then also us as Tempe overarching can see all of your data, and we can track how our student clubs are doing throughout the year. And then our last big thing is the special event registry. So the guidelines do state that all events are currently required to submit the registry, but really where it's important is the bigger high risk events. So if you're having like a little, for example, just like a little meeting in a random room downstairs, you know, no food, no nothing, that's definitely different than say having an event on the stage with a high profile speaker and hundreds of people. The registry is rather long, it's like 8 or 9 tabs. It is a longer document. Again, you just fill out the information as it asks for it. It's a lot of contact information, descriptions, checking boxes, things like that. If you ever have any issues with that, on their website, there is a contact. Same with reservations and everything else. There are contacts listed. I think it's literally just like probably, I think it's events at asu.edu, something like that. Super simple. They can help you out. Also, we can help you out if you ever have questions. And again, I will say all of these things need to be submitted by student officers. If advisors submit requests for rooms in the union, they usually do deny the request and ask that a student submits. So keep that in mind. And then, yeah, we're going to go over a couple of general protocols a little bit later. But I just wanted to give an overview. Oh, yeah, go for it.
So I just want to be clear on this. So for our general member meetings, we don't provide public, I'm looking at myself, so we have special events for our general member meeting, but it's just, you know, once every 2 weeks, or do we not?
Yeah. So our question is, if you're having just like kind of like a private reoccurring meeting, a small meeting, do you still have to submit the registry? And I would say, I guess it's kind of up to your own judgment, because since the university policies do currently state that it is required, if somebody asks for it and you don't have it, there is the potential for some issues there. But generally, like if you're just kind of like on your own, 10 to 15 people, like I wouldn't say worry about it too much. But yeah, just keep that in mind. And these are guidelines that came out March, so they're subject to change at any time. And we're kind of waiting on them to update them right now. So when that happens, we'll let you all know. And I'll share the link with this PowerPoint that shows you all of those guidelines, so you all can interpret them and make your best judgments.
We will note that like, you have.
If you have guests coming to campus, you will need to fill out the registry, even if it's only like a 5 people event. But we have one more question here. Go for it. Yeah, so our question is, if you submitted the registry, but you didn't post in Sun Devil Sync, is there a consequence? And that's a great question that I can actually reach out to our events people and ask specifically about. But the registry does ask for like your Sun Devil Sync link. So if they click on it and see that like the event's not listed, there's a chance that they're going to say that your event either can't happen or that they're unable to issue you a permit. And in that case, it's kind of up to you. Like, do you feel comfortable continuing without a permit, knowing that it might be required? Hopefully does that answer your question? Cool. All right. So process, just kind of a quick little overview. It's best practice to start planning this, like, and submitting your stuff 2 weeks in advance, if not more. It can take quite a while to hear back on reservations, depending on where you're scheduling, and also on permits and stuff like that. So after the club knows what they want to do, the first step is to make that reservation in your space. If you're doing something like tabling outside the MU or student pavilion, you can submit for 10 requests at one time. So you can ask for 10 dates. And after those dates are up, you can ask for 10 more. That's the max on tabling. But say you want to reserve a room for something, you can have a couple of those in the system at a time. If your club knows, like they know what they're doing for the whole semester, awesome. Submit it all at once, and then we'll get back to you. They do it kind of like in a timeline order though, so they might answer you on the earlier one first, of course, but they do see them all and they will get to you, I promise. But after you have the reservation in and confirmed, you can submit the event on Sun Devil Sync, since we do ask for your location on Sun Devil Sync. And it usually takes no more than 48 hours on a business week to get those Sun Devil Sync requests approved. We review them every single day, at least once a day. So if you submit after we've reviewed for that day, it'll just be reviewed the next day on weekdays. We do not look at them on the weekends. And once you have that and you have that code for the special event permit, you can submit the permit. And if you want food, Aramark is a great resource. Our breakfast this morning was from Aramark, and I have all of that information in here as well to share with you. Aramark's usually pretty quick. I would reach out at least 2 weeks in advance, so that they can be a little bit flexible if you need. They also have multiple menus, including a green menu, so that we can be sustainable, which is really fun. And with that, if you want Aramark food, get a quote from them and you can submit that to the event process and appropriations to see if they'll pay for your food. But make sure to submit those requests to appropriations after you have that Sun Devil Sync event in the system. Kind of some management for while you're there. Have a plan for staffing at the event, and our advisors should be present for anything large. And take attendance. Attendance is always good. And if you have food, attendance is actually required. If you got USG funding, you will have to provide them a list of your attendees after the event to ensure that you don't go over their funding cap, which is $25 per person. And we would just say, always debrief. I feel like a lot of times clubs have events and they're like, that was fun, let's keep going. But maybe take a moment to be like, well, what worked, what didn't work, how can we improve? Or maybe you notice that like there were more people at your event towards the end than the beginning. Like, should you shift your time? Things like that. So I wanted to show this to you here. This is how you can use the event pass. So if your students were to scan this QR code and then log in to the website, it will pop up their personalized event pass. So every student at ASU has this individualized QR code. You all as employees, staff, faculty will also have an individualized event pass. It makes it super fast. It's the same the entire time you're here. So if you say like, let's say all your students are first years, have them download it now. By the time they're third year, fourth year, they're gonna know it like the back of their hand. They can put it in their Apple, Samsung wallet. You just walk up and scan it and you're checked in. Usually a lot faster than scanning or entering your email or anything like that. We also have some physical copies of these over there somewhere. So if y'all want to take a closer look at it after, feel free. And then here are the resources that I'm going to share with you. So these are all of the current reservation forms that we are aware of. There are most definitely more reservable spaces on campus. So if you know of one that you don't see up here, be sure to let me know and I will include it in the resources for the club.
When you're reserving a room, do they let you know like what capabilities are in the room when you're trying to figure out which one to reserve?
Yeah, for sure. So our question is, when you reserve spaces, are you aware of the technology capabilities or Zoom capabilities? And usually depending on the room, I would say I'm most familiar with MU student pavilion policies because that's where most clubs make these reservations. And they will let you know what's in the room. And on that form, you can request what you need. So if you're like, hey, I need to be able to live stream, and they don't have that, they'll reach back out to you and say like, hey, I'm sorry, we don't have that capability. And I'm sure they can provide suggestions as well as where else to go. But luckily, because of the last few years, most of our classrooms, if not all of the classrooms, which you can reserve, have that capability, and most of the meeting rooms in the Memorial Union do as well. Awesome. I also have catering menus. This one got a little bit messed up, it would seem, but I'll put Aramark's contact there for y'all. The permit, and then for a more complete list of resources for you all, this is just the link to the Canvas shell to that required advisor training that you all took that has all of this information and more in it. And that is pretty much the end of the presentation here. I know that is a ton of information. Hopefully you were able to kind of process through some of it, but does anyone have any questions about the content? Yeah, go for it.
Are student groups allowed to fundraise independent of this appropriations process? And if so, does that change any of the requirements when they're running events that's coming out of potentially like a separate sort of pot of money?
Yeah, for sure. So our question is, can student clubs fundraise separately of USG funding or university funding, and how does that change the protocols? So yes, student clubs can fundraise. All of that information and the rules on fundraising is located in our student organization handbook. Basically, we require that the fundraising it's very evident that the club is fundraising, not the university. So let's say your club is Puzzle Club, making sure that it's clearly displayed this money's for Puzzle Club, not for ASU. And we have some suggestions in there as well, like getting a separate bank account for that funding so that you can keep track of where it's being spent. If you're fundraising for an event, that's a little bit easier. If you're fundraising to like donate to charity or something like that, that can get a little bit more complicated. Student orgs can apply to be like nonprofit organizations that get like a tax ID and all that stuff. Bit of a longer process if you're going that kind of charity way. But for events, if you pay for the food with your own money, you won't need to turn in anything. Like you won't need to turn in any of the same purchasing paperwork or any of the attendance lists or anything like that. And you are welcome to split it up. And it's actually encouraged that you split it up. So if you're asking USG for $300 for food and you're like, hey, this thing is actually $600. I just have this extra $300 because our club fundraised. You're more likely to get funded because they like to see that student clubs are also working on their own to get money. Oh, awesome. Yeah, go for it.
I thought I saw both things there, so I wasn't sure. For an event to qualify, does it have to be held on campus?
For funding?
Yeah.
So our question is, if your event is off campus, can you still get USG funding? And generally you can. It depends on what it is. So say your club like wants to go bowling, you can get USG to fund your tickets for bowling, things like that. So usually I would say yes. If you want to go eat at a restaurant, they'll usually fund that too. It just kind of like restrictions on where you go. So like if you wanted to like go to a bar or something, they're going to say no, even if you're not participating in drinking.
Because we have a facility right next to campus,
Mhm.
in which a lot of things take place. So-
Yeah, definitely can get funding for things off campus. Yeah.
I was just kind of wondering about funding for travel for trips. So we work with international students and we have one of our first big four first year students kind of engagement, trying to help them get off campus to different locations. Is there going to be more restrictions with like bus rentals and things like that, or is that still fall underneath all of the regulations?
Yeah. So our question is, if you are getting travel funding, do any of those things fall under different policies or regulations than regular funding. And I would say, yes, there are different rules, for example, like, and this may have changed. I'm not super up to date on travel. I will get you connected. But typically in the past, like if you got a hotel, they would pay for it, but you had to front the money and they would reimburse you. So there are some things like that that are special. And some campuses also have certain caps on travel funding. Like in the past, I know like the Polytechnic campus before had a restriction that like each student could only receive up to like $1,000 or $2,000. So that's more specific per place. And if we can get you connected with the actual appropriation student that does that travel stuff to get more specific information, since it is kind of tailored by what you're doing.
Right, if you know, it's fun.
Yeah, buses. We used to request buses all the time when I was a student worker, so I'm sure that it would be easier than like hotels or planes. I just know that right now, especially, there's like a large shortage of bus drivers and buses. So that would probably be something to think about just for event planning super far in advance. Yeah, but usually there's some recommended vendors that we can go through, like Arrowhead Stage Lines, things like that, that we can get you connected with to make the process easier.
Yeah, I am Lalita Obed, and our club is mainly for students from India, and we had only one approved restaurant approved by the ASU called Amaravati, only one. And we were catering food from Amaravati, but during the pandemic, this restaurant closed. So do we have a choice of another restaurant being approved?
Yeah, great question. So our question is, this club has a lot of students from India, and there's only one approved Indian restaurant on the ASU approved food vendors, and that restaurant actually shut down. So food approvals comes from a different department. The university has to approve them at a different level than us, but that's for events on campus. So if your group found an Indian restaurant that you really liked and you wanted to try to get funding to take your students to just eat lunch there or something like that, you can totally do that. The approved vendors and restrictions are more for the on-campus things, which I can connect you with the office that does that, and you can certainly inquire about it with them. But the better method for that, probably if you're trying to be fast, is to go there or go off campus, because those restrictions kind of fall into place when you're on campus.
Okay, so should we come and meet you sometime then for advice?
Sure, yeah, you can feel free to come in at any time or shoot me an email as well, and we can schedule an appointment.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, of
very
course. Don't see anything in the chat. Was there another hand raised somewhere out here? Yeah.
Can't you also submit suggestions for approved vendors like Western?
Yes. So the question is, can you submit suggestions for approved vendors? And yes, you can. You can also get vendors temporarily approved if you're having a bigger event. That's a little bit more of an involved process. It involves a lot more paperwork, and the vendors have to pay ASU to come, in addition to us paying them. But we can definitely give you that information if you're planning on having something larger, but usually the cost is around so I've done it for food trucks before, and we usually have to pay like $350 to get them temporarily approved. So if you're working with a bigger budget, bigger event, that might be a good way to go. But yeah, you can always give them suggestions, especially if you kind of work with the restaurant or the company or whoever it is. They'll need to be in contact with the university. Any other questions? All right, it looks like I'm not seeing any. I will leave the Zoom open to answer the direct message that I got. So if that was you, feel free to hang on for a minute. But otherwise, thank you all on the Zoom for coming so much. And thank you all here in person for coming so much. We really appreciate you all coming here and your dedication to help support the students. So yeah, feel free. Another question?
Yeah, one more request is this, that I tried to note down the points from the talk today, but I couldn't do it. Would we get it on mail, all the points that you showed us now?
I'm sorry, for what are you trying to submit?
No, I tried my best to note down, copy down the points, appropriation points and all that, but I could not really make notes on this. So will you be able to send the whatever you spoke today on mail appropriation.
Yeah, this presentation is being recorded, so we're
this
gonna send it
present-
out. And I'll
yes.
also send you the PowerPoint.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. But thank you all for coming. Those of you in person, take more food if you'd like more food. I know it's weird to pick eggs on the road, but there's Danishes and there's also the cool advisor mugs. So if you didn't get one, be sure to grab one. There you go. Thank you all so much.